So where you want to go first is probably to Microsoft. Again, this is only if you haven't done it. The ones that were here this morning, you still have the install tools under the download. Where you want to go is just you want to look for Microsoft SQL Server download. And let me make this bigger.
Now, for us in the morning, do you want us to go through it and set up the second server?
We can set up a second server, but you don't have to go through here to do it. I mean, you can just use the install files that are already on there. So I'm doing SQL Server downloads Microsoft. And the one that you want is the developer edition. It's free, right? So I am going to, once you start it and run it, you will come, I already did, so I'm going to get my version of it. You should get, after it installs the thing, something like this. And we will do custom. I think it's just faster to do it that way. We don't have to do, for those in the morning, we don't have to do all the extra stuff.
Ugh.
Yeah, go ahead and run it again, because I think it would be nice to have 2 copies. And those of you that are in the only in the afternoon class, right now 1 copy is enough. We'll get another copy later.
So should we be downloading it?
Yeah, we could do another copy. Just give you something to do while the other installations is happening. And eventually we will need 2 copies because we want to do a log shipping from one copy from the.
Oh, I thought you raised your hand. Sorry.
No.
So are you guys ready to do? So where I went, Microsoft SQL Server downloads. And if you download, in fact, I'll do it again. Oh, actually, I do want to quit it. If you download this takes it like 2 seconds. And then if you run this, so I'm just going to do open and it'll run it. I'll say yes. So I'm going to have 2 in my downloads. Now mine came up really fast because it realized that it was already there. It might take yours a little longer. Because you're still downloading the install package. And then you're just done there. Yeah.
Right. We should make another virtual machine, or
No, not another SQL server in the virtual machine.
Oh, okay.
Same virtual machine, not a new virtual machine.
So I can install it twice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, for those that are, I'll probably come around and help the people that are doing their installation now. I'm going to do custom, and I'm going to do install. So this basically just installs the installer. Now I'm going to magnify for that. And I'll move this down a little. Okay. So when you get here, it has lots of different things. It has hardware, security documentation, release, but really what we want is installation. If you were doing this as part of a commercial thing, you would want to make sure that the configuration was good. You'd want to make sure that all of your requirements are met, that everything is good. You might want to review the security documentation, but I'm just going to skip to installation. And we want to do a standalone installation. So first thing it does is it checks the rules to make sure, actually, first of all, it checks the rules and then it checks the update. You could check that if you want to check for updates. I don't care because it's all going away in 8 weeks anyway. So I'm going to do next.
Oh, wait, when you went on installation, what did you put in there? After installation? Sorry.
So standalone,
Oh, standalone, sorry.
which should be the first one.
No, right here. No. Oh,
The firewall warning always shows up. And again, it doesn't matter for us, but it's basically saying that the firewall is blocking any outside stuff coming in. And again, that doesn't matter for our installation, but in real life, you probably would want to open supports in your firewall so that people can communicate with the server. Because typically the server is, you know, for a network and over the internet. Now, we want to do a new installation. You can always come back and add features. If you left something out, you can always click on this and come back and add those features back in. Just run the install again. So you shouldn't get rid of your install files, the media files. We're going to do a new one. Okay, and it is a developer edition, so it's free. There's no product. You guys there? Oh, you're ahead. Okay, so I'm going to do next. You have to accept the license terms every time. Someday I will read the license terms. So we want, I think there should be some shared ones installed on this one. You probably don't have that. So for just this one, we need the database engine. I'm going to do replication, although I don't know we need it. Let's do full text. I'm not entirely sure what the data quality services are, but let's check them for whatever. Last time we found that the R and Python weren't installing properly, and I don't want to mess with it. It would be fun to get them, and at home I have no problem installing them, so I'm not entirely sure what the issues are. I think that's, now, if you haven't, I'm looking to see what you should click down here. You could do master data services, I guess. Client tools. Those are already checked for us. But if you're doing a new server installation, they won't be. You don't need the integrated. So, client tools.
the top one is standing. Where's that service tab? Yeah.
Oh, God. The morning one has extra tools because we're doing a lot of other things, data services. So the reason why some of these are grayed out, if you have multiple instances of SQL Server on the same machine, they can share certain services so you don't have to multiple install them.
Okay.
So that's why all of these are under shared features, right? So the ones that installed SQL Server in the morning, you've already got several of those things.
So what did you have checked on the top?
We definitely want the database engine, because otherwise you don't have anything. I'm putting SQL Server replication. I'm not sure we'll ever use that because I'm not going to install a cluster or anything. I did do full text because we will play a little bit with full text. Data quality services, I'm actually not sure what that is, so I checked it. And then down below, I think everything that we wanted was checked. Again, if you want to check them all, you can, but we had a couple of issues with some of these. And I don't necessarily want to lead you through all of the troubleshooting. That's why I say don't do the integration services of those. It's for the afternoon one. So I'm going to do next. All right, now, for those of you installing for the first time, go ahead and do default. Default will be localhost. You can only have one default, though. So we need to name our instance. I am going to name it ITC226. Let's call it server. All right, so after the first one, you can have one local host. All the rest have to be named. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we are not putting passwords on any of these. These are other different things. There's the database engine. There's the SQL Server agent. There's the full text filter and the SQL Server browser. Most of these aren't running. The only one running would be the server. We'll start others as we go. If you were doing this in a business situation, again, it would be wise to give them all separate accounts and passwords. I'm not going to do that, but that's for security reasons. It would be a good idea to have separate accounts and passwords for them, but we're going to leave it as is. All right, the really important thing here is to add the current user. And again, you might not want to do this in a business or production environment because notice you spelled my name as Stive. I don't know why. This is the current Windows user. We're making them the admin. It's better practice to create a separate account that's the admin account, but we're not going to do that because it would mean you'd have to log in twice every time you wanted to go in, or we'd have to do a different things. Now there's other things up here which I don't touch. This is where the default paths are. Again, in a production environment, the last place you want these is in the default paths. Particularly the temp DB, you can set some things there. File stream we're not going to do, but file stream is kind of interesting because it allows, like, you know, a SQL Server database can store documents, big documents like Word documents, PDFs, big files. It allows them to exist both in the file system and in the database system. It allows you to access them in two different ways, both through the server and through the file system. You have to enable that because it has to like double index everything. But it's a new feature. So I'm going to do next. Okay, and then it just gives you a summary of everything that you're going to do, and this install should go really smoothly. I shouldn't have said that though, because it'll take it a minute. For those of you that just joined us, the morning one was not smooth. So the one, if I do a video tomorrow, I might do another video that shows the installation of all the other stuff that we did in the morning class, because now that I've troubleshooted them, I think I can do that. once we're done with this, we will add some databases, and I'll give you kind of a tour of SQL Server. How are you doing? Did you get it downloaded and started? Yeah, you've already got to, so it's okay. You don't have it. Actually,
I'll let them know I haven't followed any software at all.
yeah. It actually, so I would just want to come back for All right, so everything passed. It's all installed. Yeah. Everything failed? Why did it fail? So you just look through one? So it's supposed to be, I think.
I didn't take the selection. I haven't got
Last quarter.
I have mine on a template, but I didn't even do much to it because I already had it done. But
But no, I wasn't receiving the
Contacts.
trying to make it work.
I've got that there.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you would. Someone's like, I want this. I was born. How much is it? More than one day. So yours all fails too. So she. This is, for some reason, like a lot of the stuff wasn't downloaded the first time maybe, first time it was made, so that.
Okay. Oh, leave it. Leave it. Oh, it's leave it.
9 hours.
Oh, that shit, yeah.
Oh, these two?
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, there's one other, so I'm going to close this. So the SQL Server is installed. But one of the things that you're going to have to do is the SQL Server management tools. Yeah, still have to install.
Oh, right, we did that this morning.
So we install.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go up
Oh, wow.
Okay, so very custom. We're just installing it. Okay, so do SQL Server Management Studio. So when you do the SQL Server Management Studio, it'll take you to a web page. And I'm not going to do this because I already have it. But what you want to do is you want to download SQL Server Management Studio. And it'll start another install. Without this, your only access to SQL Server is a command line. Which is, you know,
We morning people have to do it, right?
no, you do not. In
Right.
fact, you shouldn't do it. It'll probably throw an error if you do it.
Yeah, so we just sit tight.
At this screen,
Add the current page.
any of these things?
No, there's. So run that, and then it'll give you the management studio. We'll open it and we'll play. I'll show you some things.
Training
We wasn't doing one,
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got the unsubsidized.
Oh, we would have to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
I've got, I've got,
just
you know, one that says unsubsidized directly. Native team country, subsidized directly.
Yeah. It failed again?
That BS show.
It shouldn't
And
fail.
you're gonna wanna be called, and you're gonna have to keep yours as location the same way as this one, so you're gonna have to click that to get to the failure. I'm guessing that's where the fail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving to. This was, did this happen in the morning? Because I think it looks like it wants to delete the C++. Okay. How are you doing? What are you installing? No. We don't need
That's what I need to do.
I think it's because you got it. It's already there. Maybe. Oh, that should be a shared feature. Just do it. If the second instance fails, I wouldn't spend a lot of time debugging it now. We can look at it later. As long as you have one good working instance.
This is only one for the,
Yeah, just diagram. Again, that's not necessarily best practice for this.
Yes, I learned about that assignment in the morning. So you 74.
Oh, yeah, hold on.
That's one question.
Yeah.
Anyone doesn't have
You wouldn't want to-
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah, because I know. Oh, no. Oh, so in 20, I was importing, exporting data, but we haven't done that yet.
But it's due today.
Oh, okay,
yeah, and mine did this.
oh, yeah, we should ask Steve this.
Yeah.
We're wondering, which one of these three multi-dimensionals
I did multi-dimensional.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I don't know that it matters particularly for this. Are you installing the analysis services again? Or were they already installed, or are you just installing the first one?
This is the second one.
Yeah, the second one doesn't need all those things.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mine's failing.
SQL Server.
Well, you have
Oh,
one.
integration server.
Yes.
That's good. I don't want to spend all day troubleshooting.
Okay.
Some of them are failing on the second install. I don't know why. It looks like it's a C++ file.
Yeah.
Did you do it on your underlying one, or are you just looking at the error?
I mean, it worked fine on the first one, locked, right?
Yeah, it seems like it wants to, I think whatever, did you choose, what components did you choose?
Just the ones you told me.
You didn't choose like an analysis service. Again.
No,
That's weird.
just the very few that we used.
I think it installed the updated C++ file. So it's successful. So go to the reason is that it has we can so
Oh, sorry. A lot of it are in 226.
It's 226,
So it is 224, but look at 226,
yeah,
like installation.
you just, this you just output.
See, but so we'll ask him like it's over here. Yeah, it's like right here, the installation of the management databases. Basically, we're adding an instance of SQL Server, so.
Just kept all the same.
We already done.
Right. And then manage your database, then we'll go and do this part here.
We have to take screenshot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what it says.
You can do it now.
Right. Well, I'll still wait. Let's just wait till like. Well, see, this is the install the instance of the SQL Server.
I don't know.
Oh, then we have to connect to the Manage Studio. But then managing a database, we're creating a new database called 226. But this is kind of, this is still, we have to actually do some stuff. We weren't able to get importing, exporting data with the wizard. So he may push this one out. So, because, I mean, here's the thing. We had to install for both. He just made the installation only count once in the after classes. Most people take both. Or if you don't take the both, most people, if you want to take one, will choose the after. 226.
All right, I'm going to open up the management studio. Are we ready for that?
Yep.
So SQL Server Management Studio, you might be able to get it by searching. Mine comes up, but yours might not. But it's Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And I'm leaving it zoomed, although I hate Zoom. Management Studio, by the way, is Visual Studio. It's just a different show. And it can take a while to open. All right, so you always have to connect. And it should come up here. This one, if you have this, which is fine, that's just your default. You can do it this way, or you can say localhost. Either one will launch.
This is just a crack in the door. then from here, we can swap between.
Well, if you wanna do the other one, you can do connect
Right.
database engine, and instead of this, I don't know if it'll see it. Let's do browse for more. Database engine. Now this is only if you so there's the ITC 226 server,
Okay.
and I can connect to it, and I have both of them there. Typically, I mean we only need one. And those of you that just started this afternoon don't have two.
Right.
So you can have as many though as you want here. And they don't have to be on the same machine. The management studio can, typically, as I said, in a database server farm, you'll have boxes, rows, stacks of servers, and they won't even have any GUI on them. But one machine, maybe at the end of the stack, will be running like the management studio and have connections to all those servers.
But for right now, early in the class,
we just need one.
But we'll go to this later on.
For those in the morning class, I would use the default, the one we did this morning, and partially because it has the report server and stuff in it. And again, for the afternoon class, we don't need that.
And to get rid of the bottom one, you just right click and say disconnect.
Yeah, you could just disconnect it, or you could leave it there, whichever.
Oh, we have to.
So, did everybody get to the point where they can connect? Yeah.
We have to go through those steps.
You said this one.
Oh, no, no.
Oh, I mean, you're in there.
We can-
You already opened it up.
Go to databases. This is the one we just created for us morning afternoon. Say okay. And then, so now see how there's another stack. See, that's for us. We only care about this one. Later on in the class, we will. Not for
Do you need to connect to it?
Slippery. Slippery to.
Oh, but mine didn't.
Yeah, my tongue.
I don't think it's. Yeah, I just wanted to make certain that I can
Yeah.
before I move on.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's okay. We'll look at it later. I don't want to spend this whole hour on troubleshooting. All right, so I want to do a couple of quick discussions of kind of the layout of the object window. Most of you have seen it, but I haven't actually talked through these things much. I'm not going to talk tons through them now. We're going to add a couple of databases in a minute. I wanted to talk real quickly about the system databases. For the most part, we're going to leave them alone. The master database keeps track of all of the logins to the database. It keeps track of all the databases on the server. Keeps track of all the server level objects and properties. If you corrupt or mess up the master database, you have killed SQL Server. You will not be able to start SQL Server.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing you can do is reinstall it. If, the lucky thing is that it doesn't kill your databases. They'll be there. You have to reattach them. But it's still a bit of a pain. So basically leave master alone. A lot of database management systems hide these system databases. Microsoft doesn't. And I'm not sure entirely why. Model, it makes sense not to hide. Model is a database. If you say create database and you don't give any arguments, you get what the model says you're going to get. The model is your template for new databases. And you can go in there if you wanted. If you wanted every new database to have a log table, if you wanted every new database to have, I don't know, whatever you wanted it to have, you can add it to model, and then whenever you say create database, it'll also have those things, right? It'll change, it changes the template. MSDB we will play with, but we won't actually play with it directly. You notice down here we have the SQL Server agent and it's not turned on. Later in the summer we will turn it on. And it uses MSDB, which is a database for keeping track of schedules. And basically what it does is when you automate things, when you say, I want it to back up every 10 minutes, or I want it to log ship every 10 minutes. I want it to run this stored procedure twice a day. You can automate things, and what this database does is it keeps track of what is supposed to happen when. And it makes sure that and then the agent is actually what reads that database to execute that, to make sure that things happen. Because if you're a database administrator, which, by the way, this class will not make you qualified for. It'll let you know kind of what's going on in database administration, but it's not meant to make you a database administrator. Mostly because, if you go to a small nonprofit or something, you might become a database administrator. But if you go to a big company, if you don't have 20 years experience, it probably wouldn't let you. That's it. Anyway, you as a database administrator, you want to automate everything you can. It also has an annoying property that you can set up there where it will text you whenever anything goes wrong in the server so that you can be on call 24/7. You can actually set it up so you can say who's on duty at what times. The tempdb we'll use every time we run a query because it always does all of its scratch files and everything in there. You can manipulate, you can create your own temp tables and stuff. We're not going to be doing a lot of that. That's more the SQL class that we do that in. But it's always there, and it is available sometimes for certain things. Those are the system databases. Every relational database has system databases. They may not let you see them, but they have them. Because one of the basic rules of a relational database is that everything in the database has to be stored in tables. Every object and all of its properties are stored in tables. Everything is stored in tables. The advantage of that is you can query not only the data that's in the database, but you can query the metadata, the data about the data in the database, with the same SQL that you would use for querying the data. So we don't have any regular databases here. The report servers you guys don't have. Those are databases that keep track of all the pieces of a report. I'm not going to go through all of these. We will touch on most of these folders this summer, but this is the server level security. There will be a security folder inside of a database. We'll go in those in a moment when we add some databases. This keeps track of logins, server roles, credentials, if you have any kind of keys for encryption. Audits, I'm not sure of. I have to look at that. These are new. And I'm not sure. We have Polybase, even though it didn't load. Probably just empty. Yep, it isn't installed. I will look up what that is because that is also new. High availability is basically ways of maintaining a database 24/7. And management has a whole bunch of tools that we will look at too. Tools for managing the server. So that's a really quickie thing there. Let's bring in a couple of databases. Questions on that? I mean, we're going to go through a lot of these things this summer. A lot of the elements over here. This is actually, I thought this was a complicated list. Compared to MySQL, it's very complicated. But it's not so complicated compared to Postgres, which is, I think, even worse for its object list. You have to create a key. So we're not going to do that. But if you do a key, if you encrypt the whole database, it'll create a key for you. You have to have a thumb drive, right? It'll put the key on the thumb drive. You won't be able to read the database if you don't have the thumb drive installed. There must be other ways to do it too, but I don't like thumb drive, the idea of the key on the thumb drive. You could lose the thumb drive. You know, there are other things. And decrypting it without that key is basically impossible. When you would really want to do that is if you're taking away some like personnel database on a laptop, which you shouldn't do. That's how big data leaks happen. But if you encrypt your laptop or you encrypt the database on the laptop, it would be unreadable without that thumb drive. Right. Credentials can be all sorts of different things too. We'll talk about these later, but they can be, usually they're certificates, but they could be other biometric types of credentials and things too. I will say one thing about security on SQL Server. We'll come back to it. We're going to spend actually a fair amount of time on that later because it's really important. But Microsoft used to, several years ago, it would distribute SQL Server with everything turned on. And it got a reputation for being very vulnerable to attacks because people didn't do what they were supposed to do, which was turn those things off. So they assumed that the database administrator would go through and turn off the parts that they didn't need, but that never happened. So you could often attack Microsoft SQL Server through its default passwords.
Right. People had their own passwords, but
they didn't turn off the default. Yes. And I think the default password for SA was password. So what Microsoft does now is it ships it with everything turned off. Basically, you can connect to the server if you have a login, but it won't give you any permissions. You have to explicitly turn on every single permission. It's much safer to do that. It's a bit of a pain. They were trying to be nice by turning things on. But literally, you have no permissions on anything unless you explicitly turn them on. Now, we're in here as admin, so we have some permissions, right? We're connected already as admin, so we can do a lot of things. One of the things we can do is add our databases. So these are the same databases that I've used before. I'm making new versions, but they're not here yet. So where I would go is to github.com/spconger. And there's a place, database schema. And you can have anything you want here. But the ones that we're going to use are the community assist with the underscore and the metro alt log. And this is a zip file. They said there are other things here you can do. And I'm working on versions of these for Postgres, what's taken me really a long time on developing them is I'm trying to make the data consistent.
So you want to download Community Assist?
So Community Assist, not 2017, just Community Assist SQL. And this is for both classes. For this class, it isn't as crucial which ones, but let's do definitely do the just the community underscore assist, not the 21. Go to raw and Control A, Control C. When you're in SQL Server, you can do a new query. It's a little button on the toolbar. And I am going to paste that, and I'm going to execute it. And you know that it works when you have all these one rows affected. That's it writing the data. Couple notes about SQL scripts like this. They're really good for moving small databases. They don't work if the database is big. Because there's just too much. Like MetroAlt, the reason it's a zip file is it was close to 1,000 pages when I scripted it. And it filled up memory and crashed.
Control A. Control A.
Since I downloaded this.
You don't need it again.
F5.
Is it on your default server? Yeah. Yeah, you don't need it again.
Okay.
Did they go to the top on that?
All right, so there's that one. I'm going to just close this. You can save the script if you want, but you don't need to. Once you've run the script, the database is there. Now notice I don't see it here under databases. If I right click and do refresh, which is down at the bottom, I now have Community Assist. So the other one, the MetroAlt, is harder. Are you guys ready for that one? So I'm going back to GitHub. I'll just go back and back. Okay. So this is a zip file. So I'm going to click on that. It says that it can't do anything with it, and that's fine. We're going to download. And what I have here are the actual data files, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So I just downloaded it. All right, MetroAlt zip. If you can find it in the download folder. So I'm going to go to File, and there's my MetroAlt log. Don't open it. I want to extract it. And the easiest thing is to extract it to where the files are going to go. So I'm going to extract all. And I'm going to browse. And I'm going to go to this PC, local disk C, program files, Microsoft SQL Server. One of these three. I am going to guess. Oh, that's the ITC server. That's not the one I want. Let's go back up. I think it's the. It's the last one.
Yeah.
Actually. Okay, so that's fine. We want to extract to that folder. So I'm going to select to the folder. So there's the path. Program files, Microsoft SQL Server, MSQL 14, MSQL Server /MSQL/data. It'll be a similar path on whatever machine, but the numbers and things could change slightly. So I'm going to extract it. All right, so there's Community Assist and there's MetroAlt. There's other things too. You might notice that there's, I guess while I'm here, I could tell you that every database has at least 2 files. It has the data file and a log file. We're going to actually make a database in a few minutes that has a lot more than that. But yeah.
What's
The
the first
server
time
won't
going?
start.
Yeah, well, it just like doesn't.
Try localhost. I mean, just click on database. Type localhost. No space.
Yes.
For you.
All right, so if we go to Management Studio, even if we refresh, Metro Alt won't be there. We have to do one more step. We have to attach the database files. All right, so when you get the attached databases, so I'll go back. Right-click on Databases, Attach. Do Add, and you want to find Metro Alt. And do OK. And notice it gives you the two files. Up here you only saw the one, but it gives you the two files. And then I'm going to do OK. And now Metro Alt is there. Couple things about Metro Alt, which we may have to change. Because I made it on my database, and because we're moving the data files as opposed to just writing the script, you will find that you don't have ownership of it. So if I like try to make a database diagram, it tells me cannot execute this as you do not, basically you don't have ownership.
So what was it trying to take ownership?
Well, so what you can do is you can do properties for the database.
Right, that was it.
And I want to kind of walk through a little of these too. We're going to make a new database in a minute that'll be just to show you some features. Under Files, there is an owner. Now, I don't think this will work. So the first thing I'm going to try, though, is just to see if I can find the current user, which would be desktop STIVE. I don't think this will work, though. I'm going to do OK. Let's see if it'll allow.
They did it. I expanded it.
Yep, that worked.
Can we go over it once more then?
Sure.
You said you didn't think it would work.
Well, last time I did it with, there was a version problem too, so I had to change. So I'm going to do Metro Alt Properties, Files, and notice that's the owner, which you could just type in. But what I did is I clicked the three dots. Something Microsoft does a lot that I'm not sure I like. They have a lot of three-dot menus that don't tell you what they do. But I click on that. It goes where I can choose object types. I did Browse, and it gives me all of the users on Windows, right? Because we're set up for users. And then I looked for my, the account we made when we installed it, which is Stiv. Stiv, I'm not sure. I've never seen my name spelled that way. And then I clicked on that, checked it, and then did OK. And that made it owner of the database. So we're now owner of all the databases. And then you can close that window. The only reason you might have to do this is if you want to make some changes to the database, you have to own the database, right? You can actually change the data and stuff like that, but making structural changes sometimes. All right, so I'm going to do just OK on that.
That's fine.
How are you guys doing?
It's the same one from
These are the same databases, yeah.
So I can use that diagram for everyone, yeah.
Yeah, although we're not going to do like a lot of intense, in this class anyway, we're not going to do a lot of intense querying of the data.
Even in the morning class?
In morning class, it's more like important. Yeah. There's still be, in the morning class, it's more important than in this class. In this class, we're mostly managing the database, not so much the data. few things we will. Like we're going to make a couple of fairly hefty queries and then try to optimize them. It's one of the advantages, even Metro Alt isn't really big enough for an index to take effect, but all right, so I'm going to make a new database, and I think this is actually the assignment. One of the assignments, by the way, is to install. So if you take a picture of this, just a screenshot of this with the databases in there, well, it doesn't have to have everything open, but just the fact, so you have the databases installed and the SQL Server installed. That will do for the database, for the install assignment. Okay. All I need is evidence that you got the SQL Server and Management Studio installed. So most of the time I won't be talking through like this. I'm not sure if I said this. What I'm hoping to do is upload a lot of things for you to do ahead of time and then have time to work in class. What are we doing for time? We're doing okay. So do you guys need a break at all? Why don't we do, especially since it's so noisy out, let's do like 10 minutes break and then we'll do the last bit here. You don't have to take a break if you don't want, but if you need one, I'll give you 10 minutes. And I'll be over there.
I got community assist installed then for this one.
So you,
I extracted it.
so move them.
Okay. To
So copy them both. Okay, go to this PC. Go to open this program files.
Click on that.
Go to
Once it's downloaded, you'll open it up and say extract.
And then do that one.
Oh, still.
And then data. Continue. And then paste them in. Now you need to go into the management studio attach. So let's click on databases. Okay. And just add.
Oh, it's still going.
draw.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So you didn't get the SQL the recording services and stuff?
I thought I had. I
You
thought
got something going on
I
here. So you're doing an install. That's
Show. Let's go down here. Yeah. Do actually we have to might be able to help. Data, okay, so we want recorded services, Microsoft SQL Server, yeah, configuration. And
See, a lot of that's slow.
and then do and then do start. Oh, it's actually started. So let's do database. Do change database. Yeah, you're in the right place.
Yeah, right.
Next.
Okay.
Okay, so let's Georgia Post.
Whenever it's done. It can be, yeah.
There, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I was like, installation.
is check all.
You had a question.
Already copied this document. Should I delete it and re-extract again?
Okay. So let's go to.
That is.
And do.
You were trying to get the metro home.
I extracted several already.
So it is extracted, it's in the right place.
So now you go
Same way how
to,
you say.
Simple, you right click, tab,
Font.
what do we do with extracted food?
Extracted to play into the data.
you should, it's excellent.
They need to do one more folder.
I got one to install this.
Now we should be able to do that. So let's right click on the proposal as well. What it is. Okay, we'll do, files. It looks different.
It's like junk mail. And I'm like, give feedback for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
See if I can
This when I put
find
it,
anything.
when I add, after add I click OK.
Yes.
This,
Oh, I went out the article. And the second one that started. They're sitting up there. Something saying
Take it out.
like 14 days or something like that. To
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know.
That'll be fine. We got everything?
Yeah, is that everything?
so then we have to go to the.
So it should be, oh, so yeah, right click and property.
Property.
And then file,
Mail, but now I can't find it.
once the property window comes up. And then click it like that. That's fine, just browse.
Now,
For the check mark besides, we want the one that says, oh, this one is you, because it's on your machine.
yeah,
Whichever user you are.
I think these are.
Okay, hope so.
I don't know, because there's somebody remember it. Okay.
Except that it is a Seattle college, it's not going to be.
Oh, it should be okay. One of the ways we can test this
Ow.
is to open Metro up. And then database diagnostics is good for customers. So it didn't change the other people.
This isn't the email you got, is it?
No, mine are like 2 lines, just from bank bubble. Hey, Ronnie's coming.
And that could be because my polls actually went through, maybe
Is there another?
it's because I had to hold it, was like, we got your money, we can only hold it for this amount of time, because that could be why I got this.
It's weird that in my financial portal, they're showing that.
You only got one of the 2 loans you were going for.
No, I should.
So I know that is the case, but the school doesn't allow that in order to get the full amount. Only like 866 or something like that can be unsubsidized.
Is that what?
Or maybe subsidized, whichever one is better.
So now you should
Is
be
a smaller amount.
Right,
And
yeah, I
then-
can get any subsidy.
Okay.
So it's working.
I only got, and it was like a 12.
Okay. Are we mostly, how many people? Yeah, do you have another question?
One.
Yeah, that's one I used to use.
As far as.
And it has some good stuff, it's just that it's getting out of date.
Yeah. I mean, this is. My friend who works for civilian enforce, like kind of a code thing. She doesn't really.
All right, let's kind of finish, do the last little bit here.
Troubles. What could call them the first time.
I know.
So a couple of things. Let's build a new database, and I want to show you a little bit more about files and things. I'm going to use the GUI for this because I can show you more things. You can do it all with SQL too. So I'll give just a second. Let's go. So I'm going to right click on databases, and I'm going to do new database. And we're going to do a couple of things with this. So one of the things you have to do is give the database a name. I'm not sure I have any imagination left. I'm not going to actually put any data in this database. You guys have any good names for a database? Yeah, we're going to create a new database. This is test. Yeah. Now notice right away, it created a test primary file and a test log. It also used full text indexing is checked, which is good. We'll do that later. The owner is the default because we're creating that will be the owners, unlike Metro Alt. One of the things, well, actually, let's go. There are file groups. Well, let's look at options first, and then we'll go to files and file groups. Collation. Does anybody know what collation means in this context? These are on the options. No. It's what language you want. Why are there so many Albanian codes? Breton, Chinese, Czech, Estonian, Finnish, Georgian, Hebrew, etc. So by default, it's American English in this country, but you could do it as English.
So where you at? The
This is new database
general
options.
options.
So if you wanted it in a different language, you can choose the collation. Now the default was chosen, we just let it go by, but there was a place when you were installing where it decided, the default was US American. We could have changed it at that point if we wanted the whole database server to be a different default. But we're just letting it be that. So that's for language. The recovery models we'll talk more about when we do backups. Full is best. Full means that every transaction you do is logged. All right. The advantage of that is that if everything crashes, you can restore, assuming you have some backups, you can restore from backup and from the log. And with the log, you can actually restore up to the moment before the disaster happened. We'll play with that a little bit when we get into backup and restore. Anybody can think of a disadvantage of that?
Slow.
No, it's not so slow. However, log files can become gigantic because it's recording every transaction. And if you have a terabyte database and it's an active database, I mean, you could have a 2-3 terabyte file. So some people don't log full just because of size problems. A couple of other things about the log, which we will deal with in a minute, is that it should never be on the same drive as the data files. We're not going to mess with that, but in real life, they should not be on the same drive. Because if your disk crashes and your log is on the same disk, you're screwed. Bulk logged, we're going to leave it at full, actually. But bulk logged is, it logs everything except bulk transactions. Does that make sense? Bulk is like where you're uploading, one of the things that it reminds me of is, do you guys remember ever going into a Safeway at like 9 o'clock in the evening and when all the cash registers went dead because they were uploading their data to the corporate headquarters? That's a bulk upload. All the local data is being uploaded. The thing is that that's usually reproducible, so that you just don't log that data because then you can reapply the batches. I don't know if they still go dead at 9 o'clock. I almost never go in there, but I remember.
They don't.
They probably do. These days, it's more probably a continuous update of the corporate. There's also simple, and what simple does is it doesn't log at all, which is very simple, but really bad if you have a crash. Where simple is fairly good is if your database is for, it's very static, it doesn't change a lot. There are some databases that are just for information, like all the exhibits in the museum or something where it doesn't change hardly at all. And so there's no good reason necessarily to log transactions because not a lot are happening. And you could have a backup of the database and it would restore pretty much everything. Does that make sense? But if in a transaction database where things are happening a lot. Compatibility, we're at 2017. If you need it to be compatible with other servers that were older, you can go backwards. Back in this one up to 2008. Now there are a lot of other options. I'm not sure I'm going to go through all of them because it would take us forever. And a lot of them are only for, they're not super relevant most of the time. One thing down here, if you're having problems, this last thing can sometimes be the source. Database read only, if you put that on true, you literally can't write to your database, right? Just read only. Something that happens under certain conditions is sometimes this restrict access changes to a single user. And if you do that, then you're going to have some problems too. It literally means only one person can use the database at a time. There are certain kinds of tuning activities and things that have to be done under single user. So, but generally not, and we're not encrypting. If you want to do encryption, you have to turn that to true. All right, so I'm going to talk about file groups. We have one file right now. And I'm going to talk just a tiny bit about the file. You always have a primary database file, but you can have multiple files, and they can be spread across disks if you want. Particularly if you're doing something gigantic, it can be useful to spread it across multiple disks. I'm going to show you how to do that. A file group, though, is just a logical grouping of files. It actually has no physical structure at all. The files do, but the file groups don't. In the primary data file, it not only contains all of your data, it contains the structure of the data and all the meta information as well, if you're in the primary. The other thing I want to, this isn't super important. It can be important for some things, but stuff doesn't erase. No database can be larger, no database, how do I want to put it? No row in a database can be larger than 14 kilobytes. Does that make sense? And there's a reason for that. And this is partially of that primary data file. So it's broken up into what are called pages. And each page is 14K. And no row can be larger than one page. Again, you can't change any of this, so it's mostly just informational. And this is typical of other databases too. Most databases have limits in the size of a row. I'm not sure MySQL does because it actually treats database files as just text. Is one of its problems. So it's 14K, and you actually can't have a row that's even 14K because it has a header and a footer. Those of you that did data structures, its structure is very similar to a linked list. Right? So the header tells things like what it was hooked to before and what table it's in, and the footer goes where's the next page. And then pages are arranged into extents, which you don't have to worry about it. The extent is 8 pages. The big thing about this that I want to mention with the primary data file is that all your regular data is stored in these pages. But what do you do with something like a 4 megabyte document or a 2 megabyte picture? Because you can store those in the database. Anybody have any?
You can store routes or whatever that file's stored.
Right. What it does is it stores a pointer, basically. That pin doesn't work.
Yeah.
This one works, but it won't erase. So it does a pointer to that, what they basically call a blob file. It could be text, it could be a picture, it could be whatever. They're still stored in the primary file, right? So, but they're not stored in the pages. So at the end of this, there's a whole bunch of data that is, actually, if you've done a lot of blob stuff anyway, there's a bunch of data down at the bottom. of the file that are just the stuff that can't fit in a row. And their number, you know, they have a location, and that location is stored in the page. So everything is stored in that file, and it is not humanly readable on purpose. So there's no way to recover your data directly from the file unless you can get it to load it into another SQL server.
Oh.
Okay. So I'm going to add a file group, and I'm going to call it, this is primary. Do you want to call it secondary? You can name them whatever you want. Whoa. You can make it read only. You can do a few things. I'm not going to make it read only. You can only have one default. And I can add a second file, another file group if I want. So let's do a tertiary, maybe third. Let's just do third. All right, so we have different file groups. Now, again, the only reason you would want to do this, I just want to show you that you can do this, is that you're having lots of data, and you want to break it up across physical drives. These groups are not associated with any physical drive. These are just logical groups, right? And I'm going to show you how to add files to them. So these are things. Now, again, 90% of the databases that I do, there's no need to do this. We will later do this with a couple of databases because I'm going to show you how to partition a table. Because you can make it so that a single table is stored on different drives, or at least different files, right? This is when you're doing stuff like Amazon size, you know, this is pretty important. So I have these file groups. So I'm going to go back to general, and I'm going to add a couple of files. That's what this add is for. So and you can only have one log file, by the way. Log file is always individual and single. You can only have one log file. So I am going to add, and it can't be primary, so I'm going to make it secondary. I need to give it a name. Anybody have a good name for this? More stuff? Now, its initial size is 8 megabytes. You can change that. It will grow by 64 megabytes. So when the 8 is full, it'll go to 64. And then they'll keep adding 64 megabyte chunks until your disk collapses, basically. One of the things we'll do when you automate things is you can put on warnings, disk full warnings. You know? Now, this is where the file is. So it's in the data files thing. Again, there's not a good reason to break it up. Well, for performance, you might break it up into multiple files because it actually is faster if it doesn't have to search quite so long with the file. But typically, you would want to spread these files out a little bit. So this is in the secondary one, and I'll do one more file. Again, this database is not one we're ever going to use, but I'm just trying to show you some of the features, some of the things you can do. More stuff still. Oh, another thing is you should have a logical naming pattern. That makes sense, not this. And again, instead of primary, which you would throw in an objection to. Now, each file group could have, I'm putting one file in each file group, but you can have multiple files in each file group, right? A file group is literally that, a group of files. Files, unlike the groups, though, are physical things that have a position or, you know, a place. They're actual files. Now, they won't be used. I mean, it's entirely up to SQL Server how to use them unless you are going in and partitioning tables. Typically, I'm not sure how it would use them without you partitioning things. I'm sure it does. Okay. So I am going to do OK. And then while I'm still zoomed, I'm going to go into the file folder. And I want to show you that our test log, I think I might need to refresh this folder. Where are all my files? Maybe it's not going to show them. Did I save? I think I did. I don't want tables. I just want the properties. Files. Yeah, they're still there. When I look at file groups, they're there. And they say they have a physical presence when I look at the files. I wonder if it doesn't create them until it needs them. Why is it not created in mine? Yeah, let's do. I went out and came back in. Is there a refresh?
More stuff.
Oh, that's right. More stuff and more stuff still. That's right. I didn't name them test something, which I should have. So they are there. And as I said, we will do a little bit of this, not too long. I think one of the next assignments is basically to partition a table. Okay, so you can make a database with multiple files. What else do we want to know about making these databases? And you can do all of this. I am going to script this database as create to a new query window. So this is if you were doing it in SQL. And one of the neat things about SQL Server, and this is true with a lot of them, most of them I've looked at, is you can script any object. And it gives you the SQL for it. It also gives you a whole bunch, like almost everything down here are just the defaults. You can get rid of them. But notice it has create database test on primary, and it gives you that file group, and then it gives you file group secondary, and then third, and it gives you the names of the files that go in each group, and then it gives you the log file.
That's what I said. I try to say this. So here's the thing, general. I say OK. Cannot use empty object in file group.
Go back to file groups. Get rid of this last one.
Oh. Oh, it's still object there.
So it should be.
Oh wait, hold on. I'll move this one. Butterfinger too. Okay, is there anything else? Finally, great flag. So now I see the file. So how do you get this to the query window?
So what I did to this, to get this, I just on test, I right-clicked. I said script database as create to new query editor window.
I'll create to new query editor window. So then you can automate this process.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could, yeah.
I take it, hack it, and
well, like Community Assist, that script there wrote that, right? The thing is, if we do new query, create database, and then you can put all of the, we just give a database a name. We have test, let's do example. And if I just execute that, it says command completed successfully. If I right click here and do refresh, I now have an example database. Notice it has all those folders, and if I right-click and do the properties, we've got, this one will only have the 2 files, because that's the default, right? And it'll only have the 1 file group. But if I wanted to add all those things, I could add those files in the SQL statement too. Yeah.
So can we take a side options text editor to make the font readable?
Yeah.
What is it? It's
Tools, options. All right. So
text
fonts,
editor, yeah. Like,
fonts and colors, if it'll let me there. Text editor. That's what I want. All right. So let's do font size 18.
yes.
I also want to get line numbers, which is under text editor,
Oh yeah.
general, no, all languages. I'll add line numbers.
Why is there languages?
Well, because you can actually write,
I know.
you can write in Python, you can write in R, and you can write in C#. In here.
Tools options.
I want to look and see what the actual assignment said to do, and then we'll probably be done pretty quick.
No, I was thinking like English and French. So I think we knocked out the initial one, installation, and the thing that showed us the managing database is the second one.
All right, so I want to just see what the very first. So one of the things for this class is to the install. We did that. So I just want to look at the assignments. So the installation, basically you just want a picture of it up and running. And you can upload that. You should be able to upload a picture. So let's go back to the second one. Managing databases. So we did a group. We essentially did this. We just did it in with different names. So you can, I don't care what names are in it when you do a picture of it, but maybe a picture of that database with multiple files, file groups. We talked about simple, full, and bulk logged. We did attach. I'll show you how to detach and retach, and I'll show you this. We loaded the scripts, but I'll also show you how to, and we did the zip. So these are basically just pictures of the things that we did. I think we're fine. I will show you a tiny bit about attaching and reattaching. We did attach, right?
Yeah.
But if you wanted to move a database, I don't know if you've noticed, once they're running and they're attached to SQL Server, you can't move them, right? If you go in there, it'll let you copy, but as soon as you try to actually move them, it won't allow it. It says that you can't do it because they're in use. So if you want to move a file, I'll do this with example. You have to detach it. And it's tasks detach. And don't click on drop here. If you click on drop, drop is how you get rid of a database. And that's not what you want to do if you're just detaching it. I'm doing OK, and notice that it's gone. All right, there's no more example database. But the files are still there. So if I go down to the file, So I have to go back to the right file place. This PC drives, program files, SQL Server, last one, MSQL, data, and the test is still there, and they're movable now because they're unattached. So I can copy them, and I could do something like go to the desktop and paste them, or wherever you want to do them. Oh, wow. I did example, not test, so it won't let me move it. All right, so let's do example. Good. You can see how long my memory is. So tasks. So let me paste. See, those paste just fine. Let me go back here. So you do it. Okay. Tasks detach. It won't allow you to detach it if there's anything talking to it. Right. So if it's open, if you have a query window open for it, it won't allow you to detach it. Couple of other things. I just copied it, so those files could go wherever. It's one way to take a files home. You cannot reattach them from here. It will not allow you to run them from any profile specific folder. Does that make sense? It has to be a root level folder. It doesn't have to be data, but it does have to be a root level folder. SQL Server is shared, and it won't allow you to run files from a non-shared environment. You can sometimes run from a thumb drive, but you have to specify it as a trusted drive. I would generally not run the files from a thumb drive, but you could try. Now, to get those back, again, if they're in that folder, we could try to attach it. I'm going to do database attach. I'm going to try to attach them from the desktop. Never know, they may have changed things so that you could do that. I have to go to users. I have to go to Stiv, I think. I'm not even getting, it's not even letting me go to the desktop. All right, so let's go back to where we were. Data. And this was example, right? I'll show you some other ways to move files. I'll do this with Community Assist. And this is the last thing I think I might do after 3. So I'm going to script. Actually, I don't want to script the database. I want to do tasks. And I'm going to do generate scripts. There's a wizard there. So I'm going to script the entire database and all of its objects. On this page, second one in, I have to do advanced if I want to do the data, because it says schema only. And I will do data. No, I don't want data only. I'll do schema and data. This only works for little databases. If you want to, like with Metroall, it creates a 1,000-page document, and it won't run. It's useless. There's too much stuff in it. So generally, that's not the way to move really big databases. But a small database, you can do this. Oh, let's do the other thing I want to do is I'm going to just save it to a new query window. Okay. And you get this create database. Couple of things that I would do, that I always do on these. Let me unzoom because I think the font's big enough. Maybe not, but I go from create database and I go all the way down to here to where it says use community assist, and I delete that. And the reason I do that is it's all machine specific and it may cause problems when you try to do it on another machine. So I took all those out, and now it should work on any machine. Mostly you have to get rid of the paths. Most of the rest is just alternate. They're just the regular options. But there you have a totally runnable script, and it has all the data. And again, this only works if your data is minimal. There's like, by minimal, there's like 200 rows maybe in one table. But in Metro Alt, there's 360,000 rows in one table. Yeah. And that's still a tiny database in terms of real life.
How do you open that script? I mean, I did the generate.
So when I did it, one of the things that I did, no, we're not going to save it. So I'll have to zoom up again. Back on where the advanced thing is.
So it was task, generate scripts.
So tasks. And then generate scripts. This is just a splash screen. When I did advanced down here, I said save to new query window.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, save to new query window.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it writes it to a file.
Yeah. Okay. That was the data.
All right, there's one other way to move these things around. You can back it up. So we'll do this later, but I could show. Oh, I didn't want to do that. All right, so I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to tasks. I'm just going to back it up. I think I will just go to the, later we will change this, but I'm just going to go to the default backup spot. It's again not where you would want to back things up in real life. So it's been backed up. So, whoa, I keep killing my zoom. So I might want to move it. I'm going to go to the files. I'm going to go to just go up one, back up, continue. I'm going to copy it. I think I could do it from there, but just for ease, I'm going to take my backup and I'm going to put it in my 226 server. So I put the backup file there. Then over here, so if I open this other server, I can do right click. Actually, so Yeah, I keep killing the Zoom because it's in my way, and I just wanted to move it. It's been too long a day, you can tell. Databases, restore database. We'll go to device. I might have to create the database first. So I'm going to right-click, new database, community assist. I'm going to do OK. I'm going to right-click, do tasks, restore, database, community assist from device. See if I can find it. I'm not finding it. Database, restore to files. We may not do this right now if I can't figure this out. Oh, device, I need to find it. So it's a file, add, there we go. Okay, okay. Now, under options, I have to overwrite the existing database. And I think that's all I have to do. No, restore database failed. What did I have? There's one other thing I need to do. Oh, get rid of that. Still failed. Why did it fail? Overwrite existing database. That's going to work. I just had to check all the things. But anyway, now community assist is here. I don't actually want to build that right now. I just wanted to do tables. All the tables are here. So you can move them by restoring a backup as well. Yeah.
You're saying that if it's in use, it can't be moved. It's also mean if it's still attached, but SMS is off. Is it still locked in?
It's still locked in.
Even okay, wow.
So the SMS, this this studio is not SQL Server, right? It's just a front end to SQL Server. It's like PHP admin or something.
Yeah.
The server itself is running. There's one way if you don't want to detach.
The server is not running.
If you turn the server off, you can move the files.
Okay. It's not static like some memory or program.
No, so it's as long as the server is running.
But typically, when you're doing administration, it's always running.
Yeah, typically you don't want your server to stop. I do notice that on laptops especially, the server will stop occasionally, and I think it's because the laptop is trying to optimize memory use.
Or power management.
Or power management, yeah. And so you sometimes have to go manually restart it, but typically you don't, particularly on a desktop or a server. It would never stop unless the power went out or something. I think that's it for today. So in terms of the second assignment, that test one with all the files, if you do right-click on it and do properties and look at the files, that actually would probably be sufficient because it shows that there's files and it shows that there's file groups. That was the main gist of the database management. I wanted to show you how to manage getting databases in and moving databases out, and I thought that would be a minimal assignment after the install.
So that's just one part of it.
This is just one part of it. Yeah, I mean, the actual assignment, there were other things like what we did.
Yeah, creating one, add new file.
Detaching.
Detach.
The only other thing that you might want to do in terms of database management, I mean, there's a lot you could do down the line. If you wanted to get rid of a database, you just do drop. And again, you have to have admin permission to do this. You could right-click it on and say delete, but I'm going to say drop example, I guess. Now, there's a difference between this and detach. If you do this, the files are gone. Not only, oops, I forgot to say drop database. If you do this, notice it gives you no warning, it just did it. Files are gone. That's it, it's no more. And it is not recoverable unless you have backup somewhere.
What is the, when you click on the data files?
When you do what?
Oh, properties, and then on it.
Yeah, okay. Every database you can do, right click and then look at the properties. So in this class, we're going to do some with a graphic, but we'll do actually a fair amount with SQL too. How comfortable are you guys with SQL? I mean, some of you just did it. I will usually show you an SQL script that's pretty close to what we're going to do. So for future assignments, like I'll come in tomorrow and I'll probably post a few things for next week. And mostly I think once we were all set up here and we've done this, got the databases, we're all set to go, mostly the Tuesdays will be open labs, right? So I'll try to give you all the stuff you need to know before you do it, and then let you guys work and I'll circulate and help. If that doesn't work, I can do some demo stuff, but we've only got 1 day a week in the lab, so.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so I talked to Eleni, and I will form a request to be tutoring in this room.
Okay.
It'll be available on Fridays from 9 to 1. I have to look at with the get the what the other usage for 3179 is. We won't have like the extended hours when we had in other quarters because they don't want people to steal things and stuff. I can try to negotiate that with Laney, say to 6 or 7, but that's the best we can do. And also, I have to appeal it to the president. So, yeah, that's too much work.
Well, yeah, they usually
because they want it open unless they only want this room open unless there's an instructor or
yeah.
the offices like Elaine. Elaine stays at 6 or 7 sometimes. So, but
there's more restricted hours on the building itself during the summer too. Yeah. Bye.
We'll try our best to get you guys accommodated.
And it'll be weird seeing you only once a week, but I do have Wednesdays if you need some help. Although I will be trying to probably make some videos on Wednesday for the things coming up. Yeah. Although talking to an empty computer.
Let's get this done.
With no one else around. So that picture you said we taken, that's the properties window. Is that all we need for this assignment? And
I will
accept that. Okay, I just wanted to make certain that was the case before.
Yeah. We talked about symbols for
I know how to.
So use Manage Studio Dialog to so do it in here.
Okay.
So use Manage Studio Dialog to create a new database named ITC226.
I thought I didn't want to log out here.
New
I wanted to
database.
shut it off.
ITC226. 226, not ampersand. At 6. Okay. So just create it. Okay, so we create it. Yeah, so just say,
If I get my
type in
laptop to work, I'll
ITC.
probably just use this virtual desktop after today.
And it creates it, and then,
But these are, I mean, these are long days. Usually it was 2 long days, but now it's just 1 long day.
so say, okay.
Yeah.
Then over there, see how test, ITC,
How I always feel.
see there? So right click on that. Right click.